You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that. I can believe that her death is a tragedy, while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making and a tragedy of the far left who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe against our law enforcement officers.
A lunatic fringe? So you're not allowed to protest over there?
JD Vance, I'm a big Catholic. I'm a big boy, and America is a Christian nation and all of this bullshit. Listen to him just lie through his teeth. And again, I want to remind you, the entire country watched a woman get executed by a unhinged, pink arm, low T terrorist ICE thug.
We are doing so much to try to find the financing networks and the domestic terrorism networks that legitimate this violence, that fund this violence, and that, of course, engage in the violence. These people should not feel emboldened because they have, for the first time, maybe in American history, an administration that is not going to tolerate political violence of any kind from anywhere.
This coming from the administration that pardoned all of the January 6 felons, this coming from a political party that home grew Timothy McVeigh. These are all of the same right-wing networks that still exist everywhere. The Proud Boys, the Don't Tread on Me. Well, where are they now? They spoke out against a large federal government that could do this exact kind of thing to citizens. But it turns out it's what they wanted all along. Just as long as they're going after a girl that has pronouns, heaven forbid, in her bio, then we can justify the killing.
What's up, family? So we got to talk about the meltdown that the mainstream liberal media is having right now. Like they're absolutely losing their minds, crying, kicking, screaming, punching the air because JD Vance told the truth. And yeah, I said it. He didn't say nothing wild, nothing out of pocket. He literally just spoke facts. And now they acting like he threatened democracy or something. And the man simply pointed out a situation where a woman, Renee Good, ended up getting shot and killed by ICE, unfortunately. And instead of just admitting what really happened, that she was at fault because she shouldn't have been there in the first place by her own actions that put her in that position. The media decided to go for delusional, like always. Now, let's walk through this together step by step because I want you to really understand what's going on, even if you ain't into politics like that, right? So here's the deal. Renee Good basically took it amongst herself to interfere with an ICE operation. And you heard that right, ICE. So I am going to show you the clip in regards to the matter, and then we could go from there.
Change our plates every morning, just so you know. It'll be the same plate when you come talk to us later. That's fine. U.S. citizen, former fucking veteran. You want to come at us? You want to come at us? I say go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Go ahead.
Out of the car. Get out of the fucking car. Get out of the car.
And there you have it, right? So she took it amongst herself to interfere with an ICE operation. You heard that right. Immigration enforcement. That's federal, and that ain't some local traffic stop. That ain't a routine parking ticket. This is a big boy government agency doing their job. But Renee, she said, nah, I'm about to be a hero today, and decided to get in the way of the law. And I don't know what she called herself, maybe some kind of ICE resistance fighter or activist, but when you actively get in the way of federal officers doing their job, that's not protest, that's not activism, that's obstruction. And that's like if a firefighter is trying to save somebody from a burning building and you stand in the doorway talking about you can't go in there, like what are we doing? You know what I'm saying? And not only did she obstruct, she escalated. We talking about aggressively interfering in a law enforcement operation. That is not free speech. That's not holding the system accountable. That's called domestic terrorism. And yeah, I said it. When you're trying to stop law enforcement from carrying out their job using threats, force, or even just intentional chaos, that's terrorism, bro. Call it what it is, but somehow after all this went down, she gets awarded. I'm not joking. They gave her some kind of activist reward, basically turned her into a martyr for the liberal movement. So I want to get this straight because she obstructs ICE, escalates the situation, gets killed, unfortunately, as a direct result of the actions of her standing in the way that took part of it. Because two things could be true at the same time. If he could have got out the way, he could have got out the way, but she shouldn't have been there in the first place. And instead of saying, yo, maybe that wasn't the move, she's a civil rights icon, right? So now I want to move on to the next clip as I go on, right? Check this out.
So JD Vance just said that the ICE agent who shot and killed Renee Good, he'll face no consequence and that he has absolute immunity. So we have a new precedent just set. ICE agents can do whatever they want with zero consequences, including killing innocent American citizens, and they'll face less consequences than cops.
So y'all do know JD Vance, which is the vice president, and at this moment, aside to Elon Musk, JD Vance is Donald Trump's right-hand man. JD Vance made a statement at a press conference yesterday, pretty much saying that the ICE agent who unalived that 37-year-old woman in Minnesota, basically saying that it was justified. And he basically said that that man will get full immunity without a fucking investigation. You made an announcement saying that the guy's going to get full immunity less than 24 hours after it happened without a proper investigation. Just because there's videos floating around of this angle and that angle doesn't mean that the investigation is complete. But for the vice president, JD Vance, to come on national television and say something like that is diabolical. And guess what?
Meanwhile, Vice President JD Vance yesterday defended the officer's actions and blamed the victim yesterday during a briefing at the White House.
What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile? What that headline leaves out is that that woman was there to interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation in the United States of America. What that headline leaves out is that that woman is part of a broader left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and to make it impossible for our ICE officers to do their job. She was trying to ram this guy with her car. He shot back. He defended himself. He's already been seriously wounded in law enforcement operations before, and everybody who's been repeating the lie that this is some innocent woman who was out for a drive in Minneapolis when a law enforcement officer shot at her, you should be ashamed of yourselves. The Department of Justice is going to investigate this. The Department of Homeland Security is already investigating this. But the simple fact is, what you see is what you get in this case. You have a woman who was trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. Nobody debates that. You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that. I can believe that her death is a tragedy, while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making and a tragedy of the far left who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe against our law enforcement officers.
Yeah, a couple of things here. The vice president using his position and the podium to say things he just doesn't know anything about at all. And also to malign the victim, this woman who is dead, this mother. And then raising more questions, actually, about ICE. So if this guy is so sensitive and the victim of a trauma, what's he doing out in the field? It's just a question. Yeah, I don't understand what's going on here. He's been through an incredible trauma, was injured in that trauma, he's out in the field, and that's the explanation. He's trigger happy because he's traumatized? Great.
The part that's crazy is we all seen the same footage, right? And like JD Vance said, two things could be true at the same time. She shouldn't have been there, and it happens to be Where if you put yourself in that position, in this case, Renee Good did, she put her car there, she was blocking the road, she should have never been there in the first place. She should have been home with her family, working her job, taking care of her business and responsibilities. But she made it her business to interrupt, and in this case, obstruct a ICE operation, which is nationwide, right? ICE is going everywhere, um, getting rid of illegal immigrants to uphold the national security, let alone the safety here in this country, the United States of America. And if you're against that, that's the most anti-American thing you can be against, because it tells you how much you care about national safety, with us being in the best country of the world, while you also enjoy the freedoms and the luxuries that America have, and let alone you embrace and continue to let alone enjoy. So the whole point of that is she died. She called herself not complying. And if she felt there was a difference, she could have took it in the hands in a matter in court. But you should have worried about your life, in this case, Renee Good, and getting home to your kid and your wife or your partner, whoever she may be. And you took this amongst yourself to accelerate the pedal. And in this case, this ICE agent, let alone officer, can write the story for himself and say he feared for his life. And also, to make it more understandable, and me talking to officers, out there in the field as well, before, it's always it always take an impact, and it always affects them to even resist and have to fight or put somebody down to the ground, to the point where they have to, cuff them or put some type of resistance or use a taser. So, or just having a traffic stop that was traumatic in itself, let alone go to a crime scene. So every situation is different, right? It's situational in itself. And the courage that they have to go out to uphold the national safety, you should be giving them the utmost respect as ICE agents, let alone ICE officers, and upholding federal law. Because it's not in our innate nature to sit here and embrace this trauma as in being normal. And if it's normal to you, then we got other questions. But to sit there and have to fight force with force, in this case, a car coming at him where he may have seen it as fear for his life in a split second, and then having to make a split second decision, is always traumatic. To take a life is always traumatic. To even arrest and fight against some resistance against these illegal immigrants and going after them and tackling them and run off. Obviously, they're not cooperative. That's why they're still illegal here in the United States of America in the first place. So even just having some resistance where you might got to put some force to even get them down to the ground because they don't want to comply either, or any type of non-compliant situation as an officer, whether it's local, federal, you name it, FBI, is traumatic in itself. That's why we give them the courage and the utmost respect for doing a job that takes guts, not knowing if they're going to come home to their family the next day, as they kiss their family members um, goodbye as they walk out that door to go do their job. So this liberal here on MSNBC, now known as MS Now, well, formerly known as MSNBC, they trying to rebrand, but they still full of bull crap of a network, because they're spreading misinformation. Who's to say that it wasn't traumatic for him, even if it's previously have happened in a previous situation? 9 times out of 10, majority of cops die, and officers from a local, state, federal level die from traffic stops, or even more when it comes to non-compliant situations like this. And he still has the courage to continue to do his job and uphold to what he agreed to, as he took the oath to sign up for the job. Right? So we saw the footage. It's not up for debate. It's not he said, she said. This was on camera. It's out there. And if you even got 1 ounce of common sense, if your brain is still connected to reality and not floating around in some ideological fantasy land, you saw exactly what it means. And it becoming a justified shooting based on what I said on how he can say he feared for his life, because now the story, the narrative can be painted in regards of him being able to paint it for her, because she's not here to defend it, because she choose not to comply and fight it in court, but live to see another day. So you saw officers dealing with someone escalating a situation, refusing to comply, creating a direct threat, and you saw them respond with force because they had to in their eyes. And you don't have to be a fan of law enforcement to understand that if you put yourself in a situation like that, especially around ICE or any federal agency, that's a dangerous game to be played. And unfortunately, she lost that game. But if you're liberal, like this woman on the screen here, if you tapped into CNN or MS Now, or Twitter activist or whatever echo chamber you live in, you didn't see that. What you saw was a murder, and you saw the peaceful angel taken too soon, and you saw ICE as the villains, Renee as the victim, even though we watched the same exact video. That's how far gone the media is, and that's how deep in fantasy land these people are. And the moment JD Vance stepped up and said, nah, y'all bugging, this was a justified shooting, the media went into a full meltdown mode, like he burnt down the Constitution or something. And all he did was say the truth, that two things could be true at the same time, and let the investigation play out. But that this woman also wasn't some kind of innocent bystander minding her business. She actively chose to interfere with a dangerous situation. She paid the price for that decision. And this is what I mean when I say we're not living in the same reality anymore. We got one half of the country looking at the footage and using logic, saying, dang, this is tragic, but it's also common sense. You don't block ICE and expect nothing to happen. Then you got the other half crying murder, giving out awards, writing think pieces about racism and fascism, turning every single moment into some emotional soapbox without even acknowledging the facts. Like, bro, you can't break the law and expect hugs. That's just not how life works. If I jump on the field during an NFL game and get tackled by security, that's on me, right? So I don't get a courage medal. I get dragged off the field. Actions have consequences. But the liberal media wants to remove all consequences and make these individuals feel entitled as spoiled children to sit there and go against officers upholding the law and enforcing the law. But as long as you're on their side, that's the only rule when it comes to these left, Democrat, delusional, liberal apologist individuals who feel as though they should be entitled, right? And let alone they are owed an apology for this type of behavior or stand up in forms of feeling bad for Renee Good when it comes to her obstructing ICE officers. They're apologetic about it, so they're standing on it and making her be a martyr. But now I want to go to this next clip. I want you guys to check it out.
This vehicle was blocking the federal agents right there.
That's right, Tom. And a big caveat, we don't know what happened before this, but they're definitely going to look at the fact this is an unmarked vehicle, but the lights are on. These are clearly members of law enforcement. So that's at least known to this driver.
Let's play the video because something else happens right here. Those officers approach the vehicle. They try to open the door. Let's stop it here. How will this help the investigators?
Whatever is said here, what these officers say, if the driver said anything or not, could really help them understand whether or not they thought there was some sort of an imminent threat. Was this person trying to listen to them? Were they scared? Or is this going to be a problem?
And then, of course, what the driver does next. Let's play that video. Trying to leave there. One of the officers felt like they were forced to fire, and they do. We want to show another angle, reverse angle of the same incident here. We're going to freeze it. This is that same angle here. And what does this show us, Tom?
Well, this appears to show an officer right in front of the vehicle. That and between the way that the vehicle was moving and the timeline of that, how was the officer responding in that split second going to be critical for investigators.
Finally, one more piece of evidence we want to talk about here, and it is the bullet hole in the front of the windshield. What will this tell investigators?
Well, you look at this, you look at ballistics, you look at witness statements, you look at other video, all going to be part of this investigation.
See, what they don't want to admit is that she had a battery put in her back. She got radicalized, gaslit into thinking she was some kind of freedom fighter. Like she was out here saving the world by interfering with ICE operations. And she got recruited into that activist pipeline, and the people around her hyped her up to the point where she really believed this was a war and she was a soldier. And unfortunately, that delusion cost her life, and that's the real tragedy. But instead of calling it what it is, the media paints her like she's Rosa Parks 2.0, like she was peaceably driving with her wife and kids through the streets of Minneapolis and just randomly got gunned down for being a mom. But that didn't happen. That's not what happened. And the fact that headlines are now revealing the real story, that's intentional, right? Because I want you guys to look at this now on the screen in regards of this article, right? And it says, Renee Nicole was Minneapolis Ice Watch warrior who trained to resist feds before shooting. That's the headline. I'm not making this up. Like, this is on New York Post, right? Ice Watch, a whole organization of people watching and resisting law enforcement. And you know what that sounds like? Surveillance and obstruction. And you know what that leads to? Conflict, and now she's gone. But the media had the nerve to try and package it up like she was just driving with her partner, just living her best life, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, but you can just stop it. Miss me with it. The whole narrative falls apart once you see who she really was and what she was involved in, because the Post reported she worked with a group of activists trying to document and resist ICE activity in Minnesota. So let's read it, right? It says Minneapolis Renee Nicole Good, the mom who was killed by a federal agent after veering her car toward him, was an anti-ICE warrior and was part of a group activists who worked to document and resist the federal immigration crackdown in Minnesota, the Post can reveal. Good, who moved to the city last year, linked up with the anti-ICE activists through her 6-year-old's woke charter school, which boasts that it puts social justice first and prioritizes involving kids in political and social activism, multiple local sources said. She was a warrior. She died doing what was right. A mother named Lisa, whose child attends the same school, told the Post at a growing vigil where Good was killed Wednesday. So not prioritize education for 6-year-olds who are basically growing up and going to school to be academically taught to be academically successful, but they are being indoctrinated in regards of this whole social political woke stuff, and putting batteries in their back was transferred over to the mother, also feeling empowered to get into a whole ICE operation by obstruction, right? Resisting law enforcement, basically. So it goes to say, I know she was doing the right thing. I watched the video plenty of times, but also know in my heart, the woman she was doing everything right. Good and her wife, Rebecca, 40, were raising a boy together in a mostly working class, activist heavy neighborhood of South Minneapolis, which features tree lined streets and large number of homes with windows decked out into the LGBTQ plus flags or signs depicting George Floyd. Just as many others did in the lefty enclave, Good sent her son to Southside Family Charter School, a K-5 academy, opened in 1972, that from its inception has been unabashedly dedicated to social justice education. It was through her involvement in the school community that Good became involved in Ice Watch, a loose coalition of activists dedicated to disrupting ICE raids in the sanctuary city. And there you have it. From my understanding, she was involved in social justice. We are a tight-knit community. A lot of parents are activists. Former Southside gym teacher Rashad Rich, who resigned from the school last month, told the Post. He said current event topics like the killing of George Floyd were regular parts of the curriculum, and that last month students took a field trip where they learned about aboriginal issues, a reference to the indigenous people of faraway Australia. And I feel like this is easy to subject these 6-year-olds to feel indoctrinated in a way where now you got to think about it. They're vulnerable. They're still, not only are they learning right from wrong, but they're also learning discernment, knowing the right things to do, the wise things to do, the right things to say, the wise things to say, because there's a difference between the right thing to say. You could say something that sounds good and that's supposed to be politically correct, but the wise thing would say is on the top of, what do you stand for when it comes to not only being wise on how you do things, but also understanding that it's bigger than you when you say and do things. Because you can just say and do things and not care about what others, how you influence others. And then later on, that comes with a consequence, because now it look like you may have incited something. And the wise things would do to be aware of, you know what, that is my thoughts. I keep it to myself, and I don't want to encourage or influence anyone with my influence, which then I could be held accountable for if someone goes out of their way to do something in regards of my influence. So you be more wise and situationally aware versus you just saying the right thing that sound good, but doesn't mean that it was wise to say. You get where I'm going with him? Let me know down in the comments below if you get what I'm saying. And what I'm saying is you never know how you might influence someone, right? Big or small, or right or wrong. And in this case, this school, and when it comes to ICE, obviously this school needs to be held accountable for inciting obstruction of law enforcement, or inciting obstruction, right? To resist feds, or resist federal law and resisting law enforcement, because that's basically what it is. These topics should be out of the school. These are topics, if they want to be in people's households at the dining room table, cool. But this is no one else's business besides academically teaching these kids what they need to know to academically thrive, right? Because then they feel empowered, and this is the age group where they still could believe they could be Superman or Spider-Man, you know what I'm saying? Like superheroes and stuff. So it comes off indoctrinating. That's all I'm saying. Let me know if you agree with me down in the comments or not. But if you scroll back up to the article, I just want to say, and then we're going to head over to News Nation with Chris Cromo, and I want to wrap up the video, is when you look at all of that, right? And you focus on this word here, and it says Good moved to the city last year linked up with anti-ICE agents. If you really look at that, the whole narrative falls apart once you really see who she was and what she was involved in, like I said, right? Because if she's with a group of activists trying to document and resist ICE activity in Minnesota, how else do you define that? That's active resistance against the enforcement of federal immigration law. That is literally, by definition, domestic terrorism, resisting the government by disrupting lawful operations. And if you focus on the word for a second, resist, people love to dress that word up like it's noble, a noble thing. Like, oh, well, she was resisting oppression, resisting injustice. No, she was resisting law enforcement in the middle of an actual operation. And that's not a protest. That's not civil disobedience. That's obstruction. Right. And that's an escalation. And when you escalate situations like that, when you're trying to resist people with guns and badges who are doing their jobs, somebody's going to get hurt. And that's exactly what happened. And the part that really brings us home is how she got involved in the first place. Apparently, she got looped into this moment through her 6-year-old son, Woke's charter school. I read it to you guys. And when you look at all of that, and I just broke down resist, keyword. When you look at all of that, her son's school, a school that literally boasts about putting social justice first and teaching kids to be engaged in political movements. So now we got charter schools out here acting like activist boot camps, and they're not just teaching the kids how to read and write, they're teaching parents how to resist the federal government. It's wild. Indoctrination. That is indoctrination, plain and simple. And the worst part is, this wasn't just about her. Her son was in it too. Now it's generational. So they got the parents, and they got the parents bringing up the kids the same way, which is radical, confused, and disconnected from reality. Or I should say radical and disconnected from the reality of it. Where the common sense isn't prioritized, but delusion and let alone ideology over common sense and logic takes over, right? So it's just sad. I'm not saying that trying to be funny. It's just genuinely sad. But she got pulled into this world where people hyped her up to the point she realized she believed she was doing something righteous, right? But righteous doesn't mean legal. Doesn't mean safe. You don't get to take the law into your own hands and to act shocked when it pushes back. And that's why when JD Vance came out and told the truth, they couldn't handle it, because he didn't just talk about the shooting. He talked about the ideology of it. He talked about the culture behind what led to that moment. And what he said was, she was a warrior. She died doing what she thought was right. He wasn't glorifying it. He was exposing it. He was saying, look at what this ideology is producing. And he was right. JD didn't lie. He told the uncomfortable truth, and everybody's upset because reality doesn't match their bedroom story. And to top it all off, they out here interviewing people like this woman, Lisa, at the vigil in the article, the New York Post article that I read. and saying she knows she was doing the right thing, right? Watching the video plenty of times. But what video were you watching? Because the car escalated toward an officer, right? It's not a peaceful protest. That ain't the right thing. So now we head over to News Nation when it comes to Chris Cuomo and what he has to say in regards to the matter. Let's go.
Breaking tonight, as I was just saying, 1 or 2 people were shot by Border Patrol agents in Portland, Oregon. I don't know if it was 1 or 2. There are conflicting reports. But we are told a husband and wife are now in the hospital. The administration is saying, no, he's a gangbanger, and this was an interdiction, and the guy weaponized his vehicle, and the agent took a defensive shot. I will remind that I can't confirm any of those things, but I hope the government doesn't get shown to be saying something that isn't true. Resisting arrest is a crime. Trying to injure an officer is a crime. Neither should be defended because you don't like the enforcement, but also neither deserves the death penalty under the law, okay? And again, I cannot confirm what the government is saying. We will let the facts be revealed as quickly as they can, all right? But I'll tell you right now what should not be said, okay? FAFO. That is the worst post-tragedy message I have ever heard from elected leaders in America. And that is all I'm hearing right now. After Minnesota, now we'll see what happens with this one. Who knew that we would hunger for what I used to dismiss as perfunctory, right thing to say rhetoric from elected leaders? I was wrong. It matters. Cooler heads prevail. We are all in it together. It matters in times of crisis. It reminds people to be something other than the emotion of the moment. Not here. The Nazis are coming. Kick them out. And FAFO. You do have to ask, if all this violent rhetoric is not asking for more violence, I mean, look, it's ugly to say, but they know what they're saying. They know the impact of their words. And you know it led us to where we are. There's plenty of blood on people's hands here. If you keep saying and doing the same things, are you not asking for more of what we're seeing? Our vice president, who clearly wants the big job, wants you to believe this.
The precedent here is very simple. You have a federal law enforcement official engaging in federal law enforcement action. That's a federal issue. That guy is protected by absolute immunity. He was doing his job. That woman was there to interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation. That woman is part of a broader left-wing network. What young mother shows up and decides they're going to throw their car in front of ICE officers who are enforcing legitimate law? You've got to be a little brainwashed to get to that point.
I mean, a little brainwashed. Should talk to the man in the mirror. I mean, how does he know any of the motivations of the woman? And he's judging someone who was shot in the head for going to protest ICE as a mother and as a human when he doesn't even know what's going on? Let's stick to the law. The vice president's take is a waste of his Yale degree. If you think an ICE agent can kill an American mother and get immunity, you don't understand what you're talking about. Now, he may be referring to immunity from state prosecution. Maybe, but he was unclear at best. Look, I guess he could have immunity if Trump pardons him. I mean, would that really shock you? So, here are the key factors on the shooting. We'll get to the politics. Renee Good, that woman, according to the vice president. She has 3 kids, 6, 12, and 15. They are all now without a mother and a father. The father died earlier. Nothing to do with this, obviously. The mother is dead because of 2 choices. Her decision to try to leave in her car and the officer's decision to kill her. We all see what she did. Why he decided to kill her, that's the question. And we have new clues. I don't know what the president saw or what he was told, but the ICE agent was not run over, period, okay? He walked away. It is a fallacy that he was run over by the vehicle. Here are some new facts and factors that are not fallacious. The agent was reportedly involved in another incident where he was dragged 100 yards by a car and injured trying to apprehend a migrant. The DHS Secretary, Kristi Noem, used this as a defense of his actions here. But it goes to his judgment in a way that could work for or against him. It may make investigators believe it was reasonable for him, based on what happened to him before, to perceive serious injury here. But it could also be seen as a potential basis for an overly aggressive response. And if he was distracted by his past, does that explain his apparent neglect of procedure as a 10-year ICE veteran? ICE teaches not to directly go in front of the pathway of a car. Authorized officers and agents should avoid intentionally and unreasonably placing themselves in positions in which they have no alternative to using deadly force. Now, to you, does that explain the choice to stand in front of a car when someone is trying to leave? This idea is interpreted to mean in litigation that an ICE agent cannot create the situation that causes the situation where they need to use deadly force. Meaning, a factor in judging reasonableness is if there were alternatives the officer could have taken, like moving out of the way, which he did. 3, stick to the facts. The victim here should not be dismissed as that woman. She should also not be lionized as a hero for being killed while trying to flee as officers were directing her to stop. Okay? She's not a hero. She's not a domestic terrorist for being there.
See, well, I don't know about with Chris Cuomo, man, because he sound real shaky on this one. You up here talking about whether or not she deserved it, but that ain't even a question. We're not talking about who deserves what. We're talking about whether or not it was justified. And those are two completely different things. See, this is how they try to twist the narrative. They want to keep the conversation in this emotional, mushy, subjective space where people can argue all day about feelings and vibes and morality. And, oh, she was a mom and she meant well and this is tragic. But nobody wants to deal with the legal facts. Nobody wants to step into the world of objectivity. Because once you do that, it's game over, right? If you're having an honest conversation about the law, the actual legal standard, there's only one conclusion you can reach. The shooting is justified because obviously she's not here to tell her side of it, which leaves it to the officer to say he feared for his life. End of discussion. And if you want me to break that down real slow for folks in the back, you are allowed to use deadly force if you believe your life is in danger. And that will be his angle, and that is the law. Not just how you feel, and not if Twitter agrees, not if your favorite activists think it was unjust. No, it's about whether in that moment, the officer had a reasonable belief that he was about to be killed or seriously injured. And again, we saw the video. A car floors, ICE agents are swarming. One of them is standing in front of the vehicle. He gets hit. That's it. That's the moment. That's all he's going to need for legal justification. And you don't need her biography. You don't need her intentions. She's not here to say her intentions. You don't need her Spotify playlist. All that extra stuff is emotional decoration. The facts are what matter here. But notice just how the media plays it. Watch how folks like Chris Cuomo never actually argue the justification part. They avoid it. It's like kryptonite. They'll debate everything else. Was it right? Was it moral? Did she deserve it? But they won't touch the one question that actually matters. Was it legally justified? Because they already know the answer. They know that once you get into that territory, they can't win. And that's why they try to gaslight people into arguing over subjective nonsense. And they want to trap you in a back and forth about feelings instead of acknowledging cold, hard truth. And while we're on this topic about emotional double standards, I want to point something out when it comes to the Charlie Kirk situation, because the hypocrisy is real loud. What happened to Charlie Kirk, remember? You remember how the left reacted to that? And if I'll refresh your memory real quick talking about it, the man was targeted for an assassination, and all we heard from the leftist circles was basically, well, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. They were literally justifying it by saying, well, he used hate speech we didn't like. He used speech we didn't like. He promoted hate. And that's what they said. They basically just shrugged and said he had it coming. That was the tone with Charlie Kirk. That was the energy. But now, when the same kind of cold logic gets applied in reverse, when somebody on their side make a reckless, dangerous decision and ends up losing their life because of it, suddenly they're clutching pearls, saying suddenly it's state violence and murder, and how could this happen to a mom? Like, bro, you just said the same thing was okay when it was somebody that was a husband, right? That was a father. So which one is it? Do actions have consequences or not? Or do consequences only apply when a person on the receiving end is a Republican / conservative? That's the double standard I'm sick of, right? Y'all can't have it both ways. If you're going to say that someone sparking or speaking controversial opinions deserves to face violence, then you can't turn around and cry foul when someone actively escalated a federal confrontation ends up facing consequences, right? It's amazing. It's amazing it isn't, because the left loves to dish out, but they can't take it. But they'll hype up every activist who gets in the face of law enforcement and tell them they're heroes, tell them to resist, tell them to fight the system when things go left, and when someone gets hurt or killed as a result of gaslighting, they backpedal and they play innocent and they act like the person was just randomly attacked by the government. But that's not the truth. You push them toward that cliff and then you watch them fall. So yeah, Chris Cuomo with this whole maybe they didn't deserve it angle, that's weak. That's a distraction, because deserve don't matter here. We not God. We not deciding who's righteous and who ain't. We looking at facts. And the fact is she posed a threat in that moment. The officer responded accordingly and it was justified from the legal standpoint. And if you can't admit that, then you're not being honest. You're just being illogical.
There either. And people who call Ashley Babbitt a hero, but say this woman is a domestic terrorist, just stop. Don't you see what kind of blinders you have on? So here is what is clear about this situation other than the video. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again, the easiest thing to understand in this situation is the shooting, in my opinion. What is more difficult to understand is why we're continuing the real reason that we're here, which is not what the officer, the agent did, not what the victim did, but because ICE was once again sent in massive numbers to have an aggressive enforcement raid, but also as theater. Here's my basis for calling it theater. We keep seeing scenes like the one in Minnesota play out. Speaking of reasonable, you have to reasonably believe that when you send a ton of field agents dressed for battle into communities where there is conflict and emotion, now you can blame them for the emotion and their role in the conflict, but you know reasonably that these types of moments are going to happen. And you can paint the locals as the problem, but the question is, are you doing this to have the opportunity to paint locals as the problem? I stand by the position that law enforcement must be respected, and federal law is supreme in the land. But that does not mean sending 2,000 ICE field agents to a community roiled by George Floyd 5 years ago, and in the heat of this fraud scandal, was just, oh, we got to go. We got to enforce the law. Now, like this? FAFO. And by the way, that goes for Governor Walz's decision to bring in the National Guard. I mean, why are you suggesting that you may use them to oppose or remove ICE? Seriously? Why would you bring anybody else into this until you absolutely need to? How many officers and troops are our leaders going to happily compromise for political gain? There is blood on the hands of many in this situation in Minnesota, okay? No matter what is found in the investigation of the ICE agent who did the shooting, there is plenty of blood on other people's hands as well. And I'm telling you, we're going to see more. Look, I'm already right? It happened again in Oregon. Now, you can say, well, got to enforce the law. Let me tell you something about policing that we've learned many, many times over, and we are now conveniently deciding to forget. What do we do when officers keep coming into violent conflict in communities? What do we do? Just blame the residents? Bunch of savages. Bunch of animals.
I don't know, Chris. Maybe read a little. Maybe turn off the TV and actually read the news for once. Do some research. It's not that hard, bro. We out here getting full-blown headlines saying clear as day Renee Good was a Minneapolis ICE watching warrior who trained to resist feds before the shooting, right? Didn't we just cover that here? So maybe read a little, right? Like, we're not guessing. This ain't speculation. This is out in the open. The receipts are printed, stamped, published. So when you out here acting like this is all a big mystery, like nobody knows what actually happened or what really happened or what she was really doing, that's straight up dishonest. That's just you trying to protect a narrative you're already committed to instead of facing the facts that already completely wrecked your narrative. Because let's break this down again. Not only was she involved in resisting ICE, she was trained for it. You hear what I said? Trained. That's not no casual bystander energy. That's not wrong place, wrong time. That's full on premeditated action. That's like signing up for the job. So now we're supposed to pretend like she just stumbled in a situation while doing a 3-point turn. No. We know exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just driving around. She wasn't just dropping off her kid. She wasn't just in the area by accident. She was an activist with a mission, and that mission was to obstruct and interfere with law enforcement, carrying out federal immigration duties. That's not motherhood. That's not peaceful protest. That's called being an agent of chaos. And I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. But what kills me is they say, well, she was just dropping her kid off to school. Like, that's supposed to mean something. Like, that erases what happened, right? A lot of people drop off their kids, but that don't give you a pass to obstruct federal officers and hit the gas and then let alone block traffic and with your wife out in the street too. Why was your wife, partner, whatever, running around the scene? And why were they parked directly in front of an ICE vehicle? Basic questions. And then all the answers are pointing to the same thing. They were there for a reason. They were there to interfere when they shouldn't have been there in the first place. I'm going to leave it there. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.